The man just took a nap on the plane while traveling abroad. When he landed, he discovered that his country's government had been overthrown. In an instant, his passport and money became invalid. Victor sought help from the airport supervisor, but due to the language barrier, he couldn't understand anything.
The Big Apple represents the Liberty Rebels. Okay? No more Krakosia. Okay? New government. Revolution. You understand?
After understanding the general idea, Victor was asked by the supervisor to wait for further instructions in the waiting area. He couldn't return to his country nor enter New York. He became an abandoned orphan of the world. The kind-hearted captain of the security team gave him some meal vouchers and emphasized the importance of not going outside.
That you are not to enter through those doors. You are not to leave this building. America is closed.
However, it didn't take long for Victor to carelessly lose the meal vouchers. Without them, he could only eat some biscuits and seek temporary shelter. Victor found an unfinished airport lounge and pieced together 2 rows of seats to make a bed. But being in a foreign land, he felt uneasy. Victor thought he would be able to leave soon, but to his surprise, days passed without any notification. During his daily life, he used the biscuits he carried and the complimentary jam from the airport to make delicious sandwich cookies to satisfy his hunger. The public restroom became his bathroom where he could wash his hair and take showers. He would rest in the waiting area at night. One day, the supervisor saw Victor still in the airport and was surprised that he hadn't snuck out. If this continued, it could potentially affect the supervisor's own promotion. So he proactively approached Victor and told him that there would be a 5-minute gap during the security shift change at noon today, and that was his only chance. Implicitly, he wanted Victor to escape on his own, but in reality, he wasn't that kind-hearted. As soon as Victor stepped out of the airport gate, he would be rightfully arrested by the police. At noon, the supervisor went to the monitoring room and observed every move Victor made. However, Victor seemed to have noticed the camera behind him, monitoring his every move. The supervisor, who was caught, quickly ordered his men to move the camera away.
He was just at the door.
Right, if you just go a little left.
All right.
I wait.
In the end, the supervisor's plan didn't succeed. In order to survive in the airport, Victor noticed that people would receive a 25-cent deposit when they returned luggage carts to the recycling area. But many people didn't care about the 25 cents, so there were carts placed everywhere in the airport. Therefore, Victor collected carts from all over and received 75 cents in return, which could be exchanged for a burger. Victor ate his lunch using the money he earned, and he gradually became more diligent. With a dozen coins, he could get a luxurious meal. From then on, he no longer had to worry about food. The next challenge for Victor was the language barrier. He borrowed 2 identical travel guides, one in English and the other in his own language, and compared them word by word and sentence by sentence. Gradually, he was able to understand the text on TV and started learning spoken language along with the host and could engage in simple conversations. One day, as he was pushing a row of carts, a stranger showed up and stopped him. It turns out that this person was a newly hired airport employee. His job was to collect the carts in airport. He was specifically hired by the supervisor to target Victor. So Victor once again lived off his biscuits, but he remained optimistic and cheerful. Every day he would go to the visa officer to apply for a visa, and every time he would be declined. The officer told him that there was no need to waste his effort anymore, but Victor simply said that the officer had only red and green stamps, so the probability of him receiving a green stamp would always be 50%. What he said earned a smile from the visa officer. The scene was witnessed by a nearby delivery person. He found Victor that night, offering him a meal and discussing terms. It turns out the delivery person had a crush on the visa officer and wanted Victor to gather some information about her every day to get to know her better. Victor agreed without hesitation. With this job that provided both food and a chance of luck, he wouldn't miss it. From that day on, Victor would ask about the visa officer's interests and hobbies every day. One day, his pager rang. He went to the office upstairs where the supervisor found a way for him to leave the airport, applying for asylum. The supervisor just needed Victor to answer a question and he would be able to leave tonight. Victor thought this would be easy, but when the supervisor asked the question,
Do you, at this time, have any fear of returning to your own country?
No.
the supervisor was shocked. "What's wrong with this guy?" He explained to Victor again and again, hoping he would understand his intentions. But Victor wasn't afraid of his homeland, even if it was engulfed in conflict.
His home. I'm not afraid from my home.
And so he lost this chance. This airport has a strange janitor. Every time he finishes mopping the floors, he enjoys watching people slip and fall. One day, a flight attendant accidentally slipped and fell. A man came forward to help her up. His name was Victor, and he had been stranded at this airport for a long time due to the overthrow of his country's government. He was familiar with every boarding gate at the airport. He helped the flight attendant quickly get back to her flight. When Victor saw the flight attendant again, she was standing by a public telephone crying. It turned out that she had fallen in love with a married man. She worked overtime every day just to see him here for a moment, but he didn't show up that day. Victor handed her a tissue, and they struck a conversation. Amelia, the flight attendant, asked him what he did for a living. Victor disguised himself as a construction worker, trying not to reveal his true identity. Suddenly, Amelia surprisingly invited him to have an Italian meatloaf outside. However, as Victor didn't have legal documents, he couldn't leave the airport and had to decline Amelia's invitation. In order to be able to treat Amelia to a meatloaf next time they met, Victor tried to find a job at the airport. He went from one place to another. Some mocked his identity. Some rejected him outright, until one store asked him to wait for a callback and told him to leave his contact number. Victor had to write down the public phone number for the store owner to ensure he didn't miss the call. He didn't use the restroom the entire day. Finally, the phone rang, but the result was already predetermined.
Well, unfortunately, I gotta tell you that the position's been filled.
Oh,
Yeah,
Oh.
so could you please go sit someplace else?
yeah, I go to a bedroom now.
That'd be good.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
On his way back, Victor passed by a construction site. With nothing to do, he spent the whole night painting one wall. When he admired his own work, he didn't notice the construction team was right behind him. The supervisor appreciated his skill and immediately offered Victor a job. That night, he found a map left by the delivery guy. Victor arrived at the delivery guy's secret hideout, where he found janitors and baggage handlers. The janitors thought Victor was a spy and assumed he had hidden bugs on himself. To clear up the misunderstanding, Victor had to go through the X-ray machine. Then the janitor finally felt relieved. Victor also became one of them. One day, an inspection from higher-ups was coming. If everything went smoothly, the supervisor would be promoted to director. However, his attention was focused on Victor, whose hourly wage was $19, even higher than the supervisor's.
Unbelievable. Do you know that's more than I make?
The supervisor couldn't wait to get rid of him and locked him in the break room, contacting various departments to take over Victor. But no department was willing to take over him. In the afternoon, the inspector arrived. When the supervisor passed by the security checkpoint, he found that the nuts brought by a passenger were suspicious. He smashed them open one by one, and sure enough, they contained contraband items. The supervisor's professionalism was impeccable. At that moment, the security captain pulled him aside, saying there was an emergency upstairs. An Eastern European passenger went crazy and made a scene due to the language barrier. The workers didn't understand what the man wanted. The supervisor had to call Victor over as a translator. He asked the supervisor to pass his approval on visa. In this emergency, the supervisor had no choice but to comply. It turned out the passenger wanted to take life-saving medicine to home for his father, but the workers couldn't let him do that. However, the supervisor didn't care about whether the medicine were for his dying father. He told him that he needed legal document to take the medicine. If there was no legal document, the medicine had to be left behind. The man didn't know what to do and directly knelt down to beg the supervisor, hoping he could make an exception. But rules were rules, and the supervisor refused. The man was extremely desperate, tried to attack someone, but eventually he was held down by the security guards. Victor watched the poor man was taken away. Suddenly, he called the supervisor and told him that the medicine was for goats, since the rules prevented him from bringing medicine for his father. These medicines were for animals. The supervisor knew Victor was lying. He asked the man to tell him personally that they were for goats. Victor translated for him, telling him what to say. The man didn't react in time, and the supervisor wanted to cut the fuss and have the security guards take him away.
Goat. Medicine for goat.
That's how Victor saved the man. The supervisor angrily pulled him aside.
Do you think this is a game? Huh? Do you think I need an excuse to put you back in that cell to keep you there for another 5 years? You go to war with me, and you go to war with the United States of America.
The story of Victor's bravery was exaggerated by the old man and spread throughout the airport. The next day, Victor noticed that everyone was praising him. The inspector had no problems with the supervisor's inspection. The director told him that sometimes rules had to be overlooked, and the focus should be on the people. Being compassionate was important in life, and he had much to learn from Victor. The supervisor called Victor over, and Victor had prepared a gift for him. But the supervisor didn't plan to let him go all. From now on, as long as he was here, Victor would never leave.